Chapter 7 of the Hindu Yogi Science of Breath by William Walker Atkinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 4 Methods of Respiration. In the consideration of the question of respiration, we must begin by considering the mechanical arrangements whereby the respiratory movements are effected. The mechanics of respiration manifest through 1. The elastic movements of the lungs, and 2. The activities of the sides and bottom of the thoracic cavity in which the lungs are contained. The thorax is that portion of the trunk between the neck and the abdomen, the cavity of which, known as the thoracic cavity, is occupied mainly by the lungs and heart. It is bounded by the spinal column, the ribs with their cartilages, the breastbone, and below by the diaphragm. It is generally spoken of as the chest. It has been compared to a completely shut conical box, the small end of which is turned upward, the back of the box being formed by the spinal column, the front of the breastbone, and the sides of the ribs. The ribs are 24 in number, 12 on each side, and emerge from each side of the spinal column. The upper 7 pair are known as true ribs, being fastened to the breastbone direct, while the lower 5 pairs are called false ribs, or floating ribs, because they are not so fastened, the upper 2 of them being fastened by cartilage to the other ribs, the remainder having no cartilages, their forward ends being free. The ribs are moved in respiration by 2 superficial muscular layers, known as the intercostal muscles. The diaphragm, the muscular partition before alluded to, separates the chest box from the abdominal cavity. In the act of inhalation, the muscles expand the lungs so that a vacuum is created, and the air rushes in accordance with well-known law of physics. Everything depends upon the muscles concerned in the process of respiration, which we may, as for convenience, term the respiratory muscles. Without the aid of these muscles, the lungs cannot expand, and upon the proper use and control of these muscles, the science of breath largely depends. The proper control of these muscles will result in the ability to attain the maximum degree of lung expansion and the greatest amount of the life-giving properties of the air into the system. The yogis classify respiration into 4 general methods, namely 1. High breathing, 2. Mid breathing, 3. Low breathing, 4. Yogi complete breathing. We will give a general idea of the first 3 methods, and a more extended treatment of the 4th method, upon which the yogi science of breath is largely based. 1. High breathing. This form of breathing is known to the Western world as clavicular breathing, or collarbone breathing. One breathing in this way elevates the ribs and raises the collarbone and shoulders, at the same time drawing in the abdomen and pushing its contents up against the diaphragm, which in turn is raised. The upper part of the chest and lungs, which is the smallest, is used, and consequently but a minimum amount of air enters the lungs. In addition to this, the diaphragm being raised, there could be no expansion in that direction. A study of the anatomy of the chest will convince any student that in this way a maximum amount of effort is used to obtain a minimum amount of benefit. High breathing is probably the worst form of breathing known to man, and requires the greatest expenditure of energy, with the smallest amount of benefit. It is an energy-wasting, poor returns plan. It is quite common among the Western races, many women being addicted to it, and even singers, clergymen, lawyers, and others, who should know better, using it ignorantly. Many diseases of the vocal organs and organs of respiration may be directly traced to this barbarous method of breathing, and the straining of delicate organs caused by this method often results in the harsh, disagreeable voices heard on all sides. Many persons who breathe in this way become addicted to the disgusting practice of mouth breathing, described in a preceding chapter. If the student has any doubts about what has been said regarding this form of breathing, let him try the experiment of expelling all the air from his lungs, then standing erect, with hands at sides. Let him raise the shoulders and collarbone and inhale. He will find that the amount of air inhaled far below normal. Then let him inhale a full breath. after dropping the shoulders and collarbone, and he will receive an object lesson in breathing which he will be apt to remember much longer than he would any words, printed or spoken. 2. Mid-breathing. This method of respiration is known to Western students as rib breathing, or intercostal breathing, and while less objectionable than high breathing, is far inferior to either low breathing or to the Yogi complete breath. In mid-breathing, the diaphragm is pushed upward, and the abdomen drawn in. The ribs are raised somewhat, and the chest is partially expanded. It is quite common among men who have made no study of the subject. As there are two better methods known, we give it only passing notice, and that principally to call your attention to its shortcomings. 3. Low breathing. This form of respiration is far better than either of the two preceding forms, and of recent years many Western writers have extolled its merits, and have exploited it under the names of abdominal breathing, deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, etc., etc., and much good has been accomplished by the attention of the public having been directed to the subject, and many have been induced to substitute it for the interior and injurious methods above alluded to. Many systems of breathing have been built around low breathing, and students have paid high prices to learn the new systems. But as we have said, much good has resulted, and after all, the students who paid high prices to learn revamped old systems undoubtedly got their money's worth if they were induced to discard the old methods of high breathing and low breathing. Although many Western authorities write and speak of this method as the best known form of breathing, the yogis know it to be but a part of a system which they have used for centuries, and which they know as the complete breath. It must be admitted, however, that one must be acquainted with the principles of low breathing before he can grasp the idea of complete breathing. Let us again consider the diaphragm. What is it? We have seen that it is the great partition muscle, which separates the chest and its contents from the abdomen and its contents. When at rest, it presents a concave surface to the abdomen. That is, the diaphragm, as viewed from the abdomen, would seem like the sky as viewed from the earth, the interior of an arched surface. Consequently, the side of the diaphragm toward the chest organs is like a protruding, rounded surface, like a hill. When the diaphragm is brought into use, the hill formation is lowered, and the diaphragm presses upon the abdominal organs and forces out the abdomen. In low breathing, the lungs are given freer play than in the methods already mentioned, and consequently more air is inhaled. This fact has led the majority of Western writers to speak and write of low breathing, which they call abdominal breathing, as the highest and best method known to science. But the Oriental yogi has long known of a better method, and some few Western writers have also recognized this fact. The trouble with all methods of breathing, other than yogi complete breathing, is that in none of these methods do the lungs become filled with air. At the best, only a portion of the lung space is filled, even in low breathing. High breathing fills only the upper portion of the lungs. Mid breathing fills only the middle and a portion of the upper parts. Low breathing fills only the lower and middle parts. It is evident that any method that fills the entire lung space must be far preferable to those filling only certain parts. Any method which will fill the entire lung space must be the greatest value to